Hi, welcome to the culinary classroom. My name is Michelle. I am the culinary specialist with the National School Lunch Program. In this video, we're going to actually make a simple gazpacho. A gazpacho is a great way to use up some fresh vegetables. It's a great addition to your summer food service menu as it is a cold soup. And it is just absolutely delicious and simple to make. When making a gazpacho, you can do it a couple of different ways. You can mix it in a blender. You can do a small quantity in a gallon-sized measuring cup like we're going to do today with a small immersion blender. Or if you're doing a large quantity, you can use a large Cambro container and a longer industrial-size immersion blender. So before you get started, because gazpacho is served cold, it is not cooked at all, and it is a ready-to-eat food, so you need to wear gloves while preparing it. The first thing you're going to want to do is wash your vegetables, which I have already done and have here, and then you just start prepping them. When you're prepping your vegetables for gazpacho, you're just going to rough chop them and put them into the container that you are blending it all together. So for this recipe, we use tomatoes. I'm using a green bell pepper, so it's a mild, not spicy gazpacho. If you want a spicier one, you can use an Anaheim or a Cubanelle pepper. I have cucumber. I have an onion, and I have some garlic. The garlic is optional, depending on your taste preferences. So the first thing I'm going to prep is the tomato. One of my favorite tools when prepping tomatoes is this little guy right here. Sometimes it is called a tomato shock. Some people know it as a strawberry huller. Either way, it is a great, cheap tool to use in your kitchens. You use this tool by pushing down so it's over the core and just spinning it around, and you have now removed that hard piece of that tomato. This is great in your kitchens if you slice them as well. You can go through and just core the entire case, and then they are ready to go through your slices or be sliced by hand, depending on how many you are doing. So I'm going to go ahead and core just a couple of these. I only need about 5 cups of tomatoes, so I don't want to core too many of them to begin with. And then I see a bad spot right here, so I'm going to go ahead and use this to just get that off of there as well. So now I'm just going to go through and I'm going to rough chop. For this particular item, because I'm just rough chopping it, I'm going to grip with what we call a U-grip and just go down through. And then I have 2 halves, and I'm just going to wedge it. And then go in half again. So then you have just large chunks of tomato. I'm going to go ahead and put them into my measuring cup here. And I'm going to keep going with this until I have 5 cups. So we have our 5 cups of tomatoes. I'm going to go ahead and put these into the gallon measure. And now I'm going to go ahead and cut up my pepper here. Now, a great easy trick to coring and cleaning out the center of a pepper is to actually just press down on the top of the pepper, and you'll see it cave in, and then you can tear the pepper basically in half. Sometimes it goes a little bit, but then the core comes out whole. And you can just pull out the rest of the insides, making sure to get the seeds and all of that out of there. And then I just wipe them off to the side. And I go ahead and I'll chunk up this pepper as well. And go ahead and add that right into the gallon measuring container. So the next thing we're going to do is our cucumbers. And we need about 3 cups of these, and we need to peel them and then just chunk them up about the same as the tomato and the pepper. So I'm going to go grab a peeler and get started on that. All right. So while I was getting my peeler, I also get a container to put all the peelings into and to gather up some more of this mess. Now, when peeling vegetables, especially carrots, cucumbers, things like that, you want to make sure that you know that the peeler can actually go both ways. This can make your job go a lot quicker. So then you peel it one way, flip the cucumber around, and then I'll tend to go just one way there, though, because you end up getting more cucumber than peeling if you go back and forth on some shorter ends. So gather that. And then I'm going to do one more just to make sure I have enough. So now I'm going to cut them up and put them right into my measuring cup to make sure I have the correct amount. Now I'm going to cut off the end so that I don't get that little end piece in there as well. One thing I like to do is, with holding with a U-grip, I'll cut them in half first. That way I have a flat surface to work on. That is a really important thing when cutting anything, a fruit, vegetable, or anything else you might be cutting, is that you want to make sure you have a flat surface to work with. If you can't have a flat surface, just make sure that you somehow have it stabilized so that the chance of a slip and cutting yourself is lessened. All right, I'm just about dead on, maybe slightly over, but that is okay. I'm going to go ahead and add that in there. And lastly, because I love garlic, I'm going to go ahead and add garlic in this. So I have whole cloves. You can use minced if you'd like. I'm going to go ahead and just crush it. And then get the peeling right off of there. I'm going to go ahead and take off that little rough end. Just kind of go through this just a little bit. Make sure I get all the peelings out of there. And then add that right in with the rest of the vegetables. All right, now I can go ahead and set this stuff off to the side. And lastly, I'm going to go ahead and cut my onion. I'm only going to use about half of this because of where I've reduced the quantity of this recipe. So I'm going to go ahead and half it so that I'm cutting across that root part right there. I'm going to set the other half off to the side. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut this little end off here. I leave this part whole or attached because it helps hold the onion together. Just take that off. And then it makes it a little bit easier to peel without that on there. There we go. So for this recipe, we're going to rough chop the onion like the rest of the vegetables. But one reason I like to leave this on there is because if you were only going to use a half of an onion, it's actually better to leave this on there when you have it prepped in the fridge. And another reason is if you decided you were either going to slice it or dice it really small, it gives you something to hold on to. For this particular recipe, I am now going to cut that piece off and just rough chop this onion up. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and set my tools off to the side because I don't need these anymore. And the next step in this recipe is to actually begin blending this together. Because I'm not going to be touching the vegetables anymore, I'm going to go ahead and remove my gloves. And I'm going to be using this immersion blender here to blend ours up, so it is going to get a little bit noisy for a minute. You want to first get the vegetables blending pretty well together, and then you'll add in, normally the recipe calls for sherry vinegar. We had some red wine vinegar on hand, and it's a great substitute, so that's what I'll be using today. You'll add that in and your salt, and then as you're mixing, you want to slowly stream your olive oil in. So now I'm going to get started with that. Once you see your gazpacho getting nice and creamy, you can actually stop at that point. As long as there's not any large chunks left in there, it's really good to go. One thing I want to know is you want to make sure that when you're adding your oil, you do it slowly so that it gives it a chance to emulsify with the liquid from the vegetables in this. That will help give it its nice creamy look and ensure that it doesn't separate while you're mixing it. So now you can go ahead and serve this up to your kids on a nice hot day.